So, good morning and welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living, Texas Hill Country. I am Beth Warren, the spiritual leader here, and I will be facilitating the service today. As you know, our vision is a world that works for everyone. And as such, our mission is to provide spiritual tools to transform your life and to teach you spiritual practices to live by. And we all honor all paths to God. And as I said earlier, this month we have dedicated our services to the intention of peace. And we are participating in an intention experiment with Lynn McTaggart for peace in the Ukraine. And our theme this month has been about bridging the gap between what our dreams are and the actual manifestation of those dreams. And we are exploring how to manage that gap between the incubation of our God-inspired aspirations and divinely directed dreams and the actual tangible fruition of them. And because last Sunday, today and next Sunday are all about building, actually revealing, I guess, the bridge over that gap, I'm going to begin this Sunday where we left off last, bridging the gap, so to speak, between our 2 weeks. So last Sunday, I shared a couple of passages from The Alchemist. It was a fable about following your dream. And it was written in the late 80s by a Brazilian author. And it is about a shepherd boy who has a dream, a really big dream, which he reluctantly decides to pursue. And in that pursuit, he definitely has to bridge a gap, not just a gap, but really a chiasm. So I ended last Sunday's talk with a passage in which the young shepherd has finally met with the alchemist, and someone he's been looking for throughout the book, because he believes the alchemist will have the answers to how he can find his dream. And they are having a conversation in this situation. And the boy is trying to decide if he should continue going after his dream. And at this point, it's looking pretty impossible, and it has gotten difficult. Anyone ever felt that way, that it's almost impossible? Well, here's the passage that we ended on last week. My heart is afraid it will have to suffer, the boy told the alchemist one night as they looked up in the moonless sky. Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of that search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity. Every second of the search is an encounter with God, the boy told his heart. And when I have been truly searching for my treasure, every day has been luminous, because I've known that every hour was a part of the dream that I would find. When I have been truly searching for my treasure, I've discovered things along the way that I never would have seen had I not had the courage to try things that seemed impossible for a shepherd to achieve. And so I want to read on a bit now from that place, because it will take us to our work for today. So here goes. So his heart was quiet for an entire afternoon. And that night, the boy slept deeply. And when he awoke, his heart began to tell him things that came from the soul of the world. Those who were with us last week, what would you say this is? We're talking about intuition, of course. And do you remember that what we called intuition? We called it the voice that loves me. So again, that night, the boy slept deeply, and when he awoke, his heart began to tell him things that came from the soul of the world. It said that all people who are happy have God within them. I would simply edit that to say that all people who are happy know they have God within them. And that happiness could be found in a grain of sand from the desert, because a grain of sand is a moment of creation. Everyone on earth has a treasure that awaits him, his heart said. We people's hearts seldom say much about those treasures because people no longer want to go in search of them. We speak of them only to children. Later, we simply let life proceed in its own direction toward its own fate. But unfortunately, very few follow the path laid out for them, the path to their personal legends. Now, that's the author's term for God-inspired aspirations and divinely directed dreams. And to happiness. Most people see the world as a threatening place, and because they do, the world turns out indeed to be a threatening place. So we, their hearts, speak more and more softly. We never stop speaking out, but we begin to hope that our words won't be heard. We don't want people to suffer because they don't follow their hearts. Why don't people's hearts tell them to continue to follow their dreams? The boy asked the alchemist. Because that's what makes a heart suffer most, and hearts don't like to suffer. From then on, the boy understood his heart, and he asked it, please, never to stop speaking to me. And he asked that when he wandered far from his dream, his heart press him and sound the alarm. And the boy swore that every time he heard the alarm, he would heed its message. So that night he told all of this to the alchemist, and the alchemist understood the boy's heart had returned to the soul of the world. So what should I do now? The boy asked. And that's where we're going to leave the story for today, picking it up there next week. Okay? So today we will mine some of the gold contained in what I just read. And last week we looked at 2 spiritual tools to keep the bridge revealing itself at least 2 steps ahead of us. And one was cultivating the open moment, which means to open the tiniest crack in the wall that stands between I can't have this dream and here are all the reasons why, and the actual experiences of the dream, by believing that it actually just might be possible, because with God, all things are possible. So let's say that together. With God, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible. And now have your God-inspired aspiration and divinely directed dream in mind and say, with God, this is possible. With God, this is possible. And the second spiritual tool of last week was to listen to our intuition, the voice that loves us, knowing that it will never steer us wrong. And this is a voice of the heart that the alchemist was talking about. And these tools take us partially across the bridge, but it still may feel like you are hanging out in the gap. And that's how the little shepherd boy felt in the passage that I just read. So I do understand that that can be scary and even discouraging. And one of the reasons perhaps that you haven't scurried fully across the bridge to the other side, like Indiana Jones did in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, is that you see a big problem, an obstacle, an obstruction in front of you, and you don't know how to get around it or go under it, or and there you are hanging in the gap, stuck. Can anyone relate to that, to a situation they might be in right now? I thought maybe so. but the realization that the problem is never the problem. And this is a concept we have discussed at length here, so I'm hoping you know the answer to this question. The realization that the problem is never the problem. If the problem is never the problem, then what is the problem? The answer? The way I'm thinking about the problem. The way I'm thinking about the problem. So problem, what problem? There isn't one, but our belief that there is one can absolutely keep us from successfully walking across the bridge to reach the achievement of our personal legend. In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes writes this: we must return the way we came as little children who know that life is good and to be trusted. We are to approach our problems as though they were not, approaching them in the manner they will vanish. So the real issue for us and today's spiritual tool for helping us reveal another leg of the bridge is to see the problem in a completely different light. And that is what the conversation the little boy had with the alchemist and what his heart told him. And I want to share with you another story this morning, a story you're most likely familiar with, but one in which you may have missed a key vital subtlety of the story. As I did when I was 100 times or more when I heard it in the church of my youth and growing up. But a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, no, that's not the story. Sorry. Anyhow, it's about the Israelites and the Philistines. And they were fighting a war. It was a real messy war. And on a particular field of battle, there was a Philistine by the name of Goliath of Gath, who was a giant among a bunch of really big guys. And twice a day at dawn and at dusk, Goliath would step out between the two armies and shout to the Israelites, "Let's do this war a different way. One of you step forward and fight me to the death, and the people of the man who loses will become the slaves of the people of the man who wins." You know the story now, right? Goliath. And what happens in the story? David, a shepherd boy with his slingshot, slays the giant, right? But it is so much richer than that, actually. Whenever Goliath would make his taunting offer, the Israelites scattered, running off into the hills because no one wanted to fight this giant. And now Jesse had 4 sons, and the 3 eldest were soldiers. One day he sent his youngest son, David, to take some food to his brothers in the battlefield. And he arrived at the front just in time to hear one of Goliath's rants. And when the terrified soldiers ran away, David ran with them. And sometime later, David, trying to find his scattered brothers, and in this search, he hears the details of what has been going on. He learns that at least twice a day for 40 days, Goliath has been making this proposition. Now let's pause the story for a moment. What is significant about this? 40 days, 40 symbolically, all the time it takes for transformation. 40 is the number that symbolically all of the time it takes for transformation. And so let's get back to the story. King Saul really wants this war to be over. So to encourage one of his soldiers to step up, he sweetens the pot. He makes it very sweet indeed. He promises that whatever soldier will fight Goliath and obviously win, not only will he receive great riches And not only will he nor anyone in his family ever be taxed again, but the real deal sweetener is that he will get to the hand of the king's daughter, the princess, in marriage. Now, David thinks this all sounds pretty good. And so when he finally finds his brothers, he talks to them about this and how he might like to go for it. Not only would he save the Israelites, but what a deal for him. Pretty sweet. Their reaction was, as you might expect, are you crazy? Have you seen the size of that guy? And you, just a scrawny shepherd, you're not even a soldier. And there it is, thinking the problem is the problem. And granted, it looks big and very, very scary and very much like a problem with the consequences for losing pretty severe. So you have a dream and you've taken your leap of faith and you've stepped out and then you've walked somewhat across the bridge by cultivating that open moment and by listening to the voice that loves you. And now here you are, faced with Goliath. So what do? Kick and run back to the safe side? Well, you could, but that is what makes a heart suffer most. And hearts don't like to suffer. And we learn from the alchemist, remember, everyone on earth has a treasure that awaits him, but we have to go get it. We have to bridge the gap to experience it. So we can take a clue from David and change our perception of the problem. The problem is not the problem. In fact, it isn't even an obstacle. Instead, it is the way to our dreams. Were it not for Goliath, David would not have had this opportunity. So he turned his entire attention away from Goliath and onto the dream of riches, no taxes, and the princess. In other words, he focused on his vision. He focused on his vision, his intention, his dream, not on what was standing in front of him. So this is our work as we stand midway on the bridge. We must keep our eye on the prize, so to speak. Fortified with his dream in his heart and his mind, he pressed forward and he listened to his intuition, not to put on all the armor the king wanted him to wear. He picked up 5 smooth stones, put one in his sling, and with one perfect shot, failed the giant. The obstacle removed, the way cleared. Now, everyone in that camp had the same opportunity. But as we learned from the alchemist, very few follow the path laid out for them, the path to their personal legends and to happiness. Most people see the world as a threatening place, and because they do, the world turns out indeed to be a threatening place. But not you. Are you? Are you? You are willing to walk across the bridge and you are willing to face whatever may seem like a problem, an obstacle, and perceive it differently. It is, in fact, the way to your God-inspired aspirations and divinely directed dreams. So are you ready, my friends, to continue the journey? Today, we have had 2 shepherd boys give us the same message. To dive deep into your internal resources, to know that God is with you, and to see the problem not as the problem, not as an obstacle, but rather as the way to your dream. And to keep your attention and your focus on the dream. Water the flowers, not the weeds. And once again, remember, as the alchemist told the little boy, every second of the journey is an encounter with God. And so it is.